Welcome at the 61st edition of Botcasters. Today with Arjen van Berkum, a dear friend. Dear Arjen, introduce yourself. Well, your name we know, but who are you and what are you doing in daily life?
Yeah, thanks, Doran, for having me on this podcast. Well, I'm Arjen. I'm 55. I'm what they call a serial entrepreneur. So I have all kinds of companies I have some kind of interest in, but also I'm a father. I have two wonderful daughters. And maybe the most important thing to realize is that I am one of those crazy persons that love to bind all kinds of fields of knowledge together. So I'm a mathematician, political scientist, and general economist, which means I know a lot about a lot of things, but I don't know much about everything in depth. But that's what my strength is, binding things together. So an entrepreneur in intelligence, in contract management, in data, in change management, all kinds of stuff. So let's have a chat. I mean, I sent you or you picked up a post of mine. So let's talk.
Yeah, there's one other thing people should know about you. I have a high esteem or high respect for you because you have this capability to look ahead and profoundly explain what a possible scenario of a future scenario could look like, and as a consequence, reason why it's good or not good or what could happen, and then go back into now and how we should mitigate or could mitigate that, and that makes it an interesting discussion because your post was about AI, and I would actually call it the ethical use of AI if you zoom out a little bit. And the impact on society and the direction we're going. So maybe you could explain again what you wrote, and then I'll give my opinion on it because it's been a couple months since you put out that post, and so much has happened in the big world. So maybe you changed your vision a little bit. Maybe not.
No, I didn't really change my vision. When I think about AI, what I tend to see is that everybody is now seeing this as the solution for everything. And when there's a solution for everything, and you need to think of where's this solution coming from. So what's the risk of using it? How can we make sure that we can continue to use it when somebody says, but I don't want you to use it? To be honest, most of this tech comes from the other side of the ocean, from the US. Geopolitical thinking, let's be honest, you should be prepared that a Donald J. Trump wins the elections again. And if Donald J. Trump decides that all these companies need to put all their calculating power or whatever for something in the States, then you might be in trouble. So there's a continuity risk. There's also the risk of the fact that I tend to see that some of these AI processes, not all of them, tend to wind up in circular redenations. The classical example, you lose your passport because your email got hacked. So you ask on a chatbot driven and powered by AI, let's not say if that's real AI or not, because it's another discussion, but it tells you, okay, yeah, you were hacked on your email address. I'm going to send you a link for a new password and a new email address on your old email address.
This is so funny. Arjen, this is so funny.
Having those crazy loops, because these AI things tend to look a lot like I'm doing it one step at a time, and they don't have this creativity. They don't understand when to break the rules. And one of the core human skills I have learned over the years is the ability to do something crazy and break the rules when nobody expects it. I mean, let me give you a simple example. There's this wonderful picture floating over the internet of 10 extremely bearded people and a few not that attractive ladies standing in front of a garage door somewhere in America with the wonderful quote, "Would you invest in these people?" To be honest, that was the leadership team in the startup group of Microsoft. I mean, there's so many things out there that require you to do things that an AI would never do, but gives you different opportunities. Buy, for instance, a lottery ticket. Chance to win 0.0000000 and a lot of zeros, 0.1%. But still, we buy it because we have something else, and that's the emotion that stems from the dream. And the dream is, I might win. Do we really think that an AI is going to have an emotion like, I can win? No, it's not going to happen. There are so many elements out there that require creativity, different kind of thinking, rule breaking. Maybe the right word is entrepreneurship, to do something that everybody says you're stupid, but then it turns out to be a success. I worry a lot about how AI is going to change, because if you train an AI, it's always going to get to certain types of answers. And what is going to happen if you see it like a bell curve, you're going to end up mainstream. And we all know that opportunities are usually not found in the mainstream.
So basically, you're saying everything is going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy.
A
Because
lot of things,
if you
yeah, I
it's
think,
regurgitating the same content.
yeah, and also it's going to, on one hand, give you a superior experience as a user, but in those 5 to 10% where you have something that's deviating from things, you will not get this experience. And then getting to a human being is going to be extremely hard, because most of these organizations that are banking heavily on AI, especially in consumer or customer experience processes, the business case is doing it with less people. Now, the interesting part is, where can you capture value in the future? I have a pretty large relation that actually says, yeah, I can lose a lot of AI to actually diminish the time agents need to spend in their service calls. But instead of what they did, is had to kick out all these employees that they don't need. They said to everybody, no, we're going to terminate the KPI average call resolution time, which they said to their employees, it's not a problem if you talk to a client and if it takes longer, as long as the client is happy. So if an old lady calls and wants to chat, do it. Don't think like, oh, this is going to destroy my call resolution time. No, it's about really finding where you can capture the value in your customer relation, in your day-to-day operations. That's on the front side of the business, but on the IT side of the business and the operations side of the business, there will also always be a need to be able to, at the right time, at the right moment, deviate. And then there's, of course, the vulnerability question, and the lack of multiple models that are not only supported in the cloud, driven by stateside companies, is for me a huge risk.
Yeah, because there's this thing, this risk I see. I would call the vendor lock-in. And I know yesterday, but this comes out, it's a little bit further, but the European AI Act passed in the European Parliament. So in this summer, it will go into effect. Somewhere hidden in there is a self-assessment where you have to look into vendor lock-in. Now, this is a complicated thing. But what I see happening in the boardroom is that a lot of companies, because they lack the knowledge and they lack the vision on the risks, the actual risk side, which is sort of hidden still, that because if we start experimenting, it doesn't matter. But once you start training a model, you start investing heavily, time and money. And what these big tech companies are doing, the AWS, Microsoft and Alphabet, as in Google, they're selling you cloud computing. So everybody is now, all the big corporations are in the cloud because it's cheaper, safer, etc. And now they're pushing their AI on the same cloud. And that sort of corresponds with what you said earlier. And so basically, companies will be there and invest in their AI, and it will take over jobs from people. And then the companies will start firing people, like Klarna did in Sweden, with the argument of AI. I'm not sure if it's really AI that caused it. And then what happens? They fire people, the people with the knowledge how to handle a customer. So the people you actually need if all you have is a telephone, if I would say. And they'll start turning on the cost knob. Basically, you lose control, the strategic control over your cost base, which I think is huge risk to financial security in your company because they don't give a shit. They just want to make as much money as possible because they look at shareholder value in the States.
Oh, absolutely. But let me take it one step back, because you're actually saying three things that are interesting to talk about. One is the rule of legislation. We're going completely bananas with more rules, more rules, more rules, more rules. And the reason we do more rules is because we are uncertain about the future. We're afraid of the future. Policymakers are afraid of the future. And therefore, we think we can harness the power of the future by creating rules. Well, wakey, wakey, that's not going to happen. Because at the end of the day, there will always be a backdoor in the rules. People will work around it, etc. So, to be honest, legislation will always be too late when it comes to countering measures that happen because of technology advancement. Technology is going too fast for legislators. So that means that leadership needs to not only move on a legal compass and a risk compass, but should start thinking on the ethical compass. And let's be honest, how many CEOs have a target on ethics? Yeah,
Zero.
I need
I,
to comply to the ASG rules. Okay, cool.
but
But
that's not an ethical compass. That's a legal. That's a
that's
mandatory thing.
yes, it should be intrinsical. And so that's the first part. There's the legislation that is there, but in effect what we need is ethical guidelines that are inbred in yourself.
So
So
it's
that's
about
one of
it's about people. It's not
It's
about
about
rules.
people. This is also about education, by the way. This is why I am completely flabbergasted that in almost all European countries, history lessons, philosophy lessons are kicked out of the curriculum at primary and elementary schools. Crazy. I mean, you need to learn and you need to understand stuff. So that's one. The legislation first, the ethical compass. The second thing is vendor lock-in. Having a vendor lock-in is not necessarily a bad thing if you have thought about it and if you have a relatively equal relationship base. But let's be honest, these big companies, and that's not just the alphabets, etc., but every time a large organization and a smaller organization do business, usually the largest one has these general terms and conditions, either terms of sales or terms of procurement or whatever, which they put on the smaller one. And they usually don't negotiate because they have a legal department, and the legal department says, we don't negotiate. And then there are usually stupid clauses in there about intellectual property, continuity rights, and those kind of stuff. And as long as we accept in both the sales and procurement processes that actually legal is going to provide rules of engagement in there, which are not based on continuity, but are based on risk management for your own good, which means you don't think about the other, we're going to stick into this problem. So if there's something legislators should do, they should do something else. They should not create rules like they're currently creating. They should create rules that prohibit companies that have an inherent vendor lock-in to actually push their own general terms and conditions, which are most of the time completely ridiculous. Like, for instance, there is this digital organization that's doing something like Teams, but it's not Teams, so I'm not going to name the name. But they just send out general terms and conditions change, saying that everything that goes over their platform
Can be
can be
used
used
to train.
to train their AI model.
I know which one it is.
Yeah, I also know which one it is, but I don't like to give them any kind of
It's not
exposure.
relevant, but
But
the point is what they change.
the fact is that they do it like this is both an ethical problem, but it's even more important. I think it's a problem that we tend to accept it like we do with this crazy thing. Everybody says yes, 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 because you don't have a freaking alternative. And if you really read them, you have something like, oh boy, I'm fucked.
I, I,
And but that's
I started doing that with cookies. I started looking at. I was interested if I say yes, what I say yes to. So I started looking at all the companies that get my data, and
crazy.
you look
And
at
they,
the
they
list.
call
It's
they
like,
call it they call it the justified
yeah, and then you look at the
reason or
company.
something
You look
like.
at the companies like, what the What the
Yeah.
f? What does this company need my data for? And it's all commercial. So now I just say no to everything.
Oh yeah,
Um,
but I'll actually go on a step further. Now the third thing you were saying about cloud computing, there's this continuing wave of, let me explain, of how we do things in the world of computing. We started, of course, with the fact that we had terminals and we had one big mainframe somewhere. Actually, cloud computing is a mainframe and you have dumb terminals, but it's the mainframe is no longer in the basement.
I know it's just
It's
over internet.
somewhere out there. Now, if you, for instance, take some really interesting thing from the zeros and the tens, and it's something that still runs, is the SETI program, where actually when your laptop or your computer is not working, you give the calculating power to the SETI program. What I now see happening is that organizations are now much more thinking on distributed networks and are starting to take the next step to get away from cloud by saying the only thing that cloud needs to have, it's kind of like the blockchain technology, is to know where something is stored. And if it's based on a general ledger kind of type, if it's on 6 laptops in my organization, I can pretty well assume that that's the right information. So that means that there are things happening out there, although small, where I see that organizations are rethinking their distributed data strategies. They're rethinking how to use all this calculating power that's in these current day machines, which also means that companies are starting to think like, yeah, why do I really need AI? Because the thing AI is amazingly good at is the thing that most companies don't use AI for. What AI is really good at is processing vast amounts of data to develop patterns and whatever. And yes, your chat GPT can write a fantastic thingy for you, but in the end of the day, it does that based on all kinds of information. And the thing is that this basic information needs to be created. And what you tend to see is that organizations are now also starting to realize that if they want to outperform and want to outclass the competition, you cannot do that only by doing the things the others will do as well. Because to be honest, if Coca-Cola and Pepsi and all those beverage companies will start using AI to identify client patterns and start making tailor-made offers, in the end of the day, everybody's going to make the same offering. And the only thing that's going to change is the way they market the product. EA, that means what kind of visuals are they going to use? But in the end of the day, consumers want to be found unique, which means that you need to really think on where are you going to make the difference. And AI is going to help you because it can free up capital. And you said something about the cost structure, but that's to be honest, usually a short-term fix, because after a year, when you have fantastic cost savings, the CFO comes along and says, "Let's pay more dividend," and then all these cost savings are
Or
not
buy
being.
our own shares.
Yeah, but these cost savings are then not translated into service improvement and product innovation. What I find completely crazy in today's current world is that we are so freakingly uncreative that we need to buy our own shares. I mean,
So what you're saying is that we're so
shareholder
freaking money
value is
driven.
so stupid.
It's money and value driven in the sense that we have to create value, but the sense of value is not. That's a monetized vision on value, where you're saying you should actually have a different vision on creating value, and that's not money. The money comes later.
Yeah, and I tend to see, I work a lot for family offices, but also for large corps. What I tend to see is that family offices are far more better equipped to think like, what do I need to do to be still here in 30 years? These large corporations are thinking like, yeah, but I'm now the executive and my long-term and short-term incentive bonuses are completely dependent on what shareholders think. So therefore, they are not doing the right innovation stuff. And what I see is that the current corporate structure and the way corporate structure is starting to use AI is not going to drive innovation. It's going to stupefy organizations. They're going to go for cost savings. And these cost savings, they are not going to invest in readiness for the future, but these cost savings, they are going to put in shareholder stuff. And that means that in the long run, a lot of the current large day organizations will face the same thing as the original companies in the New York Stock Exchange, because those were all railroads. Guess how many railroads there in there now? Uh,
Amtrak, maybe.
no idea, but
I think that's the only one I know.
it's over. I mean, the way we do business, the way organizations function, will mean that large organizations will slowly deteriorate because they're too slow, not innovative, not changing. That means that we will continue to have some hyper organizations that actually deliver a scalable structure. Because nowadays, as a startup, it's relatively easy to be everywhere around the world using the cloud. So the cloud does have significant benefits. But for large organizations, it's going to
Well,
stagnate them.
actually, Arjen, it does have advantages, but also complications due to, for instance, GDPR legislation and that kind of stuff. If a country has different, well, other countries have different rules. So you might need to store some data in Europe, some data in the States, some data South America somewhere because of local legislation. And operating in that country might force you to have the data stored locally. So
Or even break them up. I know of a smart technology that works like this, that hashes the information and then spreads it over 3 cloud providers. So
interesting.
none of the cloud providers has the entire data set.
So they can't do anything with it. So let's
Mm,
go. Let's go a little bit back because you said something that triggered me. When I used to work my first job in the 90s, previous century, in an insurance company, a big Dutch insurance company. That was my first job in insurance. I didn't know shit about financial services other than the insurances I had. So they gave me this internal coach to get me up to speed really, really quick. And this guy taught me something about management and board of directors in big companies. And you just said it. He said, you get the behavior you inspect, not the behavior you expect or you would like to have, if you look at it from an ethical perspective. So if the bonus focuses on profit, short-term profit, that is what you will get, not the long-term profit, which you actually need as a company registered in the stock market, because you want to create long-term value. And this was an interesting thought. And if you look at behavior in boardrooms, it's exactly what you said. This is what we see. And
yeah, but let's also be honest. There are, of course, organizations and leaders out there that are really willing to change the world and do things, even if it's not in their KPI structure. However, at the end of the day, and let's, for instance, take organizations in the big oil world. New CEO means new strategy. Means that, for instance, all the investments in green fuels are being diminished by 50 to 60% because they want to give more shareholder value, which means that in the end, and we should not dwindle it on too long because this is not something that's going to be easily changed. But in the end, if AI is going to be used in these kind of companies solely to reduce cost, it will in the end create a huge dependency on what they sourced. And what we tend to see is that actually a lot of organizations that outsourced large part of their IT in the early zeros, late 90s, are now actually rethinking that strategy. Because what they now tend to see is that IT from a supporting process has become a primary process. And that means that knowledge about cloud computing, the risks resolved around that are something that are becoming a primary process. And then what you see happening, we discussed legislation earlier. Let's be honest, if you really understand how cloud computing works and what you could do with it, are you then going to work for the government?
And no, then you go to work one of these big ones and take $1 million salary home.
Yeah, if that's what you find important, or you go work, for instance, in areas of cyber defense, where you actually can do something what you really like to do, and be meaningful, but it's not in rulemaking. And what we really should be putting a lot of effort on is how to make sure that we actually are going the right way as a species. Because let's think Darwinistic. The earlier people start to get lazy because there's AI, the less they learn, the less we'll grow as a species. We'll become stagnant if we don't watch out.
Well, that's an interesting philosophical and maybe even a realistic vision. But that brings me to the schooling, because what I see happening um, um, is that kids in school, you have kids, I have kids, and we get to deal with young people that come from universities or practical schooling. They have a hard time reading and absorbing longer text of information. And of course, AI can help with that, but it's impossible to judge whether AI did a good job if you can't do it yourself. This is when I graduated. My professor told me, it's like, listen, if you never held a broom yourself and cleaned a room, how on earth are you going to judge the guy or woman who's doing it and manage that person? So if you want to be a good manager, you need to understand what it is to do the work.
Yeah,
And here goes
that's
the
that's
same.
that's
If
that's
if you
that's partly true when you talk about things in AI. I think that it's vital to understand how these things work, which is something else than being able to do the same, because what these things do is something a human cannot do. So
no, I
you need to understand the conceptual part of it. The other thing is um, vital is to be really able to understand if what you're getting is and seeing and hearing and reading is actually a lot of BS, or is something that's actually there. We see the usage of fake news, of manipulated information. We see it in all kinds of stuff happening, and which means that we need to really, really, really take care on where do we want these kind of tooling to become part of our lives. I mean, for instance, the algorithm generated advertising is really dangerous. Uh,
elaborate, because this is becoming interesting. It was interesting already, but I have a
to,
philosophy
gi-
on this.
to give you an example, um, if there is, for instance, a conflict somewhere in the world, um, and you have a family that's partly engaged into that conflict in the world. So that's an address that Googles on how does this conflict ever existed, etc., etc., etc. So there's an interest in the family. Now some kid in that family, kid, goes to YouTube and Googles something like, "I want a unicorn movie." How in
Nothing
the
strange.
how in the hell would you precede that with an advertisement that is about? I don't think all listeners gonna love this. Come live in a kibbutz, especially tailored on kids. I consider that to be non-ethical practices.
Well, but the problem is because they advertise on IP address.
Yes, and but it means that they harvest this information, and it means that people that have a genuine interest in something, which might not mean that they're interested in the conflict, but are interested in how does this work, why is it there, are actually being seen as therefore being a target for something. So if I do, for instance, research on how fusion energy could work, then it would be kind of strange if when I watch a YouTube video for ambulance chasers, which is one of my guilty pleasures, um,
I didn't know that.
how these guys ride through the traffic, etc., I really find that amazing. Another reason AI is not going to go in that space soon, but um, then what I would not be expecting is to get an advertisement that I could buy my own home fusion center. And I mean that we don't tend we tend to forget that genuine interest in something is not the same as I have a buying need.
So,
And,
so
and
well,
using AI on this kind of behavior will make sure that people that actually have an interest actually get swamped with stuff that's actually going to make sure that their interest dissipates.
and I'm really happy that you stipulated this example because I've been stating that people or companies have no idea where they are currently using AI. I give you a few examples. One of them is online advertising and retargeting. It's stacked with AI. And there's so much AI that if you would hold that against the European AI Act, especially the example you just gave, and whether it's living in kibbutz or something else, or donating money to some weird cause, whatever, it doesn't matter. It could be and would be and probably will be considered unethical. Now, knowing that most of that data also runs in the States, like you said before, you have a new problem because all this privacy related data, which is somewhere under the radar, all of a sudden, now the European AI Act and GDPR come together.
Mm-hmm.
Which, if you think about that, it magnifies it. It creates I wouldn't say a new problem, but it creates actually the opportunity for an ethical window. That's what I would say. If you turn that around, I would say, okay, online advertising is dead. We use AI, but it's always opt-in. You need to say, yes, you can approach me for. Then the value of online advertising goes up because it's one-on-one. I told you I'm interested in trips to Mexico or something else. Just, fire it on me. Just lay it on me as much as you can. Because this month I'm planning my trip. So I want to see advertisements every day and I'll decide by the end of the month, which is fine.
That could be a way. I'm not in favor of that way, but
No, but I'm exploring. I'm not saying that that's the final way of doing things, but it is. What I'm trying to say is that companies are not aware of where AI is being deployed. Because another thing, if you have an iPhone, right?
mm-hmm.
Do you use facial recognition or biometric? You're one of the smart guys that knows. But so a while ago, I talked to a CEO of a company. They have more than 500 people employed. Most of them have an iPhone or one of the iPhones. So I asked him, "Oh, that's nice. Do your people use biometric recognition to get into the phone?" He said, "Yeah, facial recognition or fingerprint or whatever." I said, "Interesting." So, do you know where that goes? And he looks at me. What do you mean? I said, where is that biometric information of your staff stored? Is it on your own server? No, I don't think so. So I, called the CTO. CTO had no clue. Turned out that, like we know, of course it's not. It's on the device and it's somewhere in a server, and nobody knows, and it's not limited to Europe. So, do you realize that if you would take the AI Act, there's an algorithm behind it. This falls on the European AI Act. There's your biometrics of your staff in there. You're responsible. You're supplying the phone.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy looked at me and was like, shit, I need to talk to my legal department because I literally have no clue.
Yeah.
And I said, but it's an example of how it's hidden in a lot of things we do.
Oh yes, but it takes us back to the starting point of most of these giants.
Giants as in tech corporations, you mean?
Tech corporations, but the entire internet world per se is from day one there has been a design flaw in the internet related business model. And the design flaw is that everything should be free and the data should pay for it.
So if it's free, you're the business model.
Yeah, and to be honest, if for instance one of the streaming companies would say, I'm going to put advertising in my streaming company. That will be the day I immediately leave that streaming company, because I want streaming because I can do it anytime I want. I don't get advertising, which is what I want. Which is why I, for instance, on some of these social media platforms are not there, because I cannot get it into a closed off situation. That's why I like things like the YouTube premium and premium models, where you can actually be ad free. And then that means that you don't get bombarded. The same goes for news. I rather pay for a news site than having all these crazy advertisements, which usually cost me a lot of time and are usually waste. But that's a choice. And now, if you're thinking about legislation, we're talking about earlier in this conversation about the European AI Act, etc., is that we are not addressing the fundamental issue that's at stake here, is that the business model of online is flawed and that the consumer is the weakest part of the chain. And we can talk a lot about protecting the consumer and protecting the clients and whatever, but in the end of the day, we're not doing it. Because if you look at how all these European laws are being edited, being run, being done, and whatever, there's always a loophole, etc. Let's not even talk about the fiscal regime on digital products, because that's, if you think that doing something in the physical world is difficult, don't go into the digital world with all these crazy VATs per country, per state, per city, per whatever. Um, that means that we have created a global market that's highly unregulated, where you are the product, where there is legislation that's always running behind, that has companies in there that are focused on cost efficiency, and those kind of things, and not focused on customer intimacy and creating long-term sustainable relations. It's all one-offs, which means that you get a society, and that's the society we're currently getting, that's fully based on me. I want, because in everything I'm bombarded that I should love to go to Ibiza. What the fuck? I don't like Ibiza. I don't even like the sun. I get burned, so I don't want to go to Ibiza. And I like house music, but I like house music in my car when I drive fast, and I don't need to go to a club and
That's
get.
like Germany. You need to go to Germany
Yeah,
in order
exactly.
to go fast.
The thing is that we are redesigning our way we operate as a species, and we're not really thinking about it. We're thinking about monetizing it. And let's be honest, if the world keeps on developing like this, there are two potential futures: the dystopian one or the utopian one. The utopian one, where we don't need money, the robots are doing everything, and everything is great and fun, and everybody's equal, and there's no need for governments and Putins and Bushes and whatever. Um, we're pretty fast on the track of going dystopian, where the haves in the digital and the physical world are going to be the ones that are ahead of the pack. The way, for instance, AI is not being deployed in Africa, not being deployed in large parts of South America, is not really being deployed for the underprivileged in APEC. How China is using it as a command and control system, and we are like, yeah, but we need those materials for our electric cars. Yeah, let's be honest, we're going dystopian if we continue in working this way. So we really need to have this discussion on what we want to be as a species, not as a company, not as a country, but as a species. And as long as we are not having that discussion and doing everything based on old school economics, where perpetual growth is important, where we are continuing pushing on monetary value, where we're continuously pushing on doing stuff with as little people as possible because we see people as a cost. Well, I
It's a
think
commodity. We
you
see it
should
as a commodity.
you should people see as actually your core asset, because
Okay.
everything else can be automated. Your uniqueness is going to be the people, and it's not going to be having the best AI. So
Actually, it's the people. If you would have the best AI, it's the people that create that best AI.
yeah, but how long are you going to keep the best AI? Because in today's innovative speed, if somebody in China discovers something today, it's also going to be today in Europe and it's today going to be in the US. So there is no real competitive advantage in first mover. That on one thing, you need to be a continuous first mover. And in order to be a continuous first mover, you
You
need
need
to
great people.
continuously innovate, you need to be continuously creative, you'll be doing constant dialogue, and you need to drive the unexpected to actually overarch the expectations of clients, suppliers, or whatever in your value chain.
Well, actually, Arjen, this is actually a great consultancy session for boards of directors, how to organize your company and prepare for the future. Because basically that's what you're saying. But the ethical discussion you're saying about who we want to be as a species, which is could be considered philosophical, and yet it's not. I understand what you're saying. Where and who should have that discussion? Because if we do it on a national level, as Dutch, I'm sorry to say, it's not going to make a ripple in the ocean.
I think that the thing that we need to do, that's also the reasons why I be in podcasts like this, is as long as we start spreading this kind of messages, as long as we start having these talks and people think about this, there's actually, let's call it a kind of like a Star Trek phrase, hope for mankind. The hope for mankind will dwindle away if people are no longer thinking about this. This is not about me saying something. I'm completely irrelevant. You are completely irrelevant. Every individual becomes irrelevant. But if we, as a collective, as a species, start embracing these kind of concepts, that we need to rethink ourselves in the current situation, then we actually are going to experience something we have not experienced for a long time. And that's that we usually are amazingly good in stressful situations because we needed stress to survive. Shit, there's a tiger hunting me.
I need to
Uh,
run.
I need to run or get a stick with a point and do it with 5 friends and then kill the thing. Um, um, we have, as an evolutionary species, learned to survive based on stress. We have learned to survive based on cooperation. We have learned to survive based on the fact that sometimes sacrifice is part of growth. And what we've been doing for the last couple of 100 years is actually turned it around and gone completely into me, my zone, I want this, etc. So that's not socialist talking, because socialist talking would be going about everybody is equal, everybody needs the same kind of house, etc. No, I believe performance should be rewarded, outperformance should be rewarded. Um, but I also think that from a more generic, holistic perspective, it's about getting people to think about this. And to be honest, I have a lot of hope for the generation that's currently at universities because I teach at quite some of these universities. I meet a lot of young people, and although 80% fall into the corporate life trap, becoming a lawyer, becoming a consultant, becoming a
The 9 to 5
now
treadmill.
it's not nine to
I
five,
know,
but
but we call it the 9 to 5 treadmill.
the 9 to 5 treadmill with
The,
everything that's being arranged, nice salary, no risk, and whatever.
getting hooked on the monthly salary.
I have high hopes for that 30% that doesn't want to go into that life, and they are either going to NGOs, they're starting up their own businesses, and most startups nowadays have from day one a genuine interest in planet
Ethics.
and ethics. So I am not that worried, but we should be teaching uh, children, students, the value of these things. So it's not about saying in schools, you should not bring alone your phone. No. I mean, it's an integral part of our lives. We should have the right discussion. It's the part of what role do we want these devices to play in our lives? How can they enhance our learning capabilities so we get better as a species? And then, of course, you come into a total different space because take a small step back to the COVID crisis. I have people in my network that have 5 children, and in that entire house, they have one smartphone and one laptop, and then you need to do homeschooling.
Jeez. Impossible.
And then we don't arrange when we do homeschooling for these kids to have laptops. I mean, we can do all kinds of stuff and we can do so much more with technology if we were able to say not to people, it's your responsible to have the basic needs of the technology. No, I mean, if you really look at in my heart, I would love internet to be free. So you don't need to pay for it to be on it. I love, for instance, devices for children to be free. Just give it to them. But then also make sure that the right stuff is on there and not the wrong stuff. And then start using it as part of the educational journey, because for knowledge transfer,
It's ideal.
it's ideal. But for learning how to think, no, it's not ideal. So we need to talk on all these levels. If it's educational reforms, it's ethical reforms, it's the way we do business, it's a way about corporate governance works. On all these levels, we should have these kind of discussions. And then all these discussions will lead somehow to a generic force that will drive the change. And what the change is going to be is actually irrelevant, because we're not the ones making the future makes itself. But what we should be doing is creating the right starting points so that we have the right discussions. That's the only thing people like you, like me, should be doing. We should not be saying this is what we want the world to be. We should be saying this is what we need to think about. And then get people to think about it. They start talking with each other. And then out of that, there will come a generic movement. And that will take time. We'll need, I think, 30 to 50 years to really take this hurdle. And then in another 50 years, if we go utopian, is to either think about how we're going to abolish money. And then we really need to think if that's going to happen or not. But to have that philosophical discussion is actually relevant. Does it mean that it needs to happen? No, couldn't care less. I want the discussion.
But if you then look at the way how you run your companies or the companies you invest in,
Mhm.
and then I know a couple of things, but if you would take that or that philosophy and bring that to the current boardroom of, I don't know which company, doesn't matter, but big corporations with a lot of staff, they can have impact, because if you have a lot of staff, you influence a lot of people. And I truly believe that an exemplary leader in the company creates exemplary behavior with the staff. It's leading by example, and all the other things, they're fine, but this is actually what works. Also in compliance, if you have a straightforward leader that's honest and transparent, that's what you get from your staff. That's the
Correct.
culture you create. So how would you take that, what you're saying? Because I think you're right. We should talk about these things, and it will not happen overnight. It's not going to be revolution. It's going to be evolution. In small steps, we're going to move somewhere, but we can actually push that move and get things done by inspiring people to make changes in companies. Like we said, take it away from the short term profit. Not have these KPIs in your company where people are pushed to have. I one time left a company because we were focusing on the yearly results. Then it went down to the 6-month results and the quarterly results, and then they were pushing for the monthly results. I'm like, yeah, well, go fuck yourself. I'm done, because basically I'm running after my own tail, going crazy, and everything we were doing for the long term strategy, we cannot commit to it because first of all, we don't have any time. We're just focusing on hunting the monthly results. And secondly, we don't have any money for it because we have to pour it in to get the monthly results, which you are demanding from us. So if we can make companies have that discussion and move away from that and focus on long-term value, long-term results, long-term well-being of their clients and employees alike, both.
And suppliers.
And suppliers, sorry, but actually the whole ecosystem. Because I fully agree. If you don't let your suppliers breathe, they will choke, and eventually that comes back to you. and your customers or your employees are going to be the victim of that, and your
Yeah, I
bottom
have,
line.
I have some ideas on that. For one, um, one of the key solutions is actually called diversity.
Okay.
And then for me, diversity is not just gender or what you like to have at the other side of your bed or whatever. Um, for me, diversity is along all axes, and that's age, that's orientation, that's color, that's background, that's education level, that's the way you think, the way you act. There's so many drivers in diversity that you need to start really thinking on it. And it also means that you need to have diversity in every kind of decision making process. So, for instance, I find it completely crazy that in most large companies, the board consists of people that have lifetime experience. Because if you have lifetime experience, you also have a lifetime experience in avoiding risk,
And making mistakes.
and usually also not making mistakes because you haven't done anything to make mistakes, so you're in the red race didn't fall out. Um, so it starts with diversity. The second thing is com- making
Contemporary.
yeah, making it contemporary, but also compartmentalize it. For instance, I really don't believe in strategy departments. What I do believe in is setting up small focus groups that completely act independent of each other on certain topics. For instance, I once said to a very large insurance company in Switzerland, what you should do is you should put 5 people that have no experience with your company, actually no experience in the industry, set them in a room, not in one of your offices, and say to them, we're going to pay you and we want you to redesign the insurance company of the future. Good luck. And then see what happens. And you could do the same with technology. I mean, we have now all kinds of architects that are thinking on the current infrastructure, how it works, how it's set up, and oh, should this tool fit in or not, or whatever. Cool. But where are the people that are thinking about, um, say we can do everything we want? What should we then really be doing? There's so many constraints within organizations being set up, compliance departments, IT architecture, business rules, HR, all those
Legal.
legal that all want something in the current status, why you cannot change the current status because they're in the powers that be. So if you want to change as a large organization, you should start thinking on how do I break that? How do I break stagnancy in my culture? How do I bring innovation? And innovation is not new tech or doing something else. No, innovation is also social innovation. Redesign your organization, rethink on what you're doing, and don't say, yeah, we've done agile, therefore we are innovative. No, that's not enough. Uh,
I've heard that so many times.
it's and then infuse that with the core human thinking set, and that's critical thinking. If you really embrace critical thinking, because that's something an AI is not going to do, the AI will help you to improve your critical thinking and decision making process, but it's not going to overtake that. So if you really want to take these kind of steps, yeah, it's an investment, and it's an investment in the future, and it is an investment that's not going to materialize during your boardroom tenure. So it's actually creating something for your successor. And you know what? You should be happy that your successor can have the benefits because that's legacy. And legacy is not, I earned $1 million a year, got a nice big bonus, and the company got sold to a venture capitalist who's now doing something completely different, carving it up, and even earning more money. I mean, that's the problem of the old school economy. It's the problem of the old school leadership. We need to change it, and these kind of discussions need to happen. Now, does this mean this will happen overnight? No. Does this mean it will happen soon? No, because I said before, I teach at business schools. When in the average business schools, 40 to 50% of the education is about financial engineering, discount cash flows, and whatever, yeah, then it's not going to change. If leadership for the future is drilled in financial instruments
It's a
and not in
technocratic approach,
social instruments or technology instruments,
or
then
ethical instruments.
that's for me relevant. And then the only thing that will change this is to keep on sending this message. And then one day, somewhere, somehow, somebody that heard the message actually becomes the CEO and then still realizes that he or she once heard this message and is going to drive change. And that means that people like you and me, who are old school, we're old guys, are not going to be the ones that are going to bring that change. We are going to be the ones that enable future generations to make the change and be the change.
That's actually a beautiful statement. Um, it's sort of that actually silences me, because it makes me realize that whatever we do in our lifetime or in our career time, working time, um, that we maybe will see the impact when we're retired, but not in our working time. And I just realized, okay, if you accept that, then it's fine. But if you think you can achieve something on that end within your working years, well, you
Also
have to
fine.
wake up. Chances are small. Unless
Yeah.
you build a company with 1,000 people, then you might have that impact.
Mm. At the end, if you're talking about legacy, legacy is so much more than just the money you made. Legacy is about the people you touched. And
I
that might
fully
sound
agree.
muggishly philosophical,
No, no, no,
especially.
no, absolutely not. If I get a trainee, I had a couple of years ago in the company, and I trained the person, and I get a WhatsApp message from that person saying, "Oh, I just made the next step in my career because the stuff you taught me, I practiced it, and it helped me move ahead and doing the right things." I'm like, oh wow, I didn't even realize I taught you that, but thank you.
Yeah, and that's the joy of giving. And now, if we bring that back to the original topic, AI, AI is just one of the things that's happening in our society, in our world. That's a massive change, and we have seen several of them. I could make a few things. Let me give you some historical parallels. For me, the usage of radio in the 30s of the last century was actually a breakthrough in communication. It made it easy to fast track information to all over the place, and especially certain German people made excellent use of that to discover something called propaganda.
At
Now,
relatively
is
low cost.
at a relatively low. Now, let's take the internet thingy we are currently seeing in politics. That's also the same thing, a new technology with new ways of communication at low cost, which makes it easy to drive propaganda. And if this propaganda is political, or if propaganda is salesy, we call it marketing, but in the end, it's still propaganda.
Yeah.
Um, we are using technology for that, so we need to think on these kind of implications. And AI is making it possible to micro target even better, but to actually, and that's something different from the radio invention and the internet invention and now the AI invention. AI makes it possible to put people on a trajectory what you want them to think, believe, and be. And that is 100% ethical question. And it means that your dependency on AI becomes an ethical question. The dependency on the owners of the fuel of AI data becomes an ethical question, a continuity question, and a risk question, which means that your strategy around data, around the storage of data, around the use of data, around cloud should be fueled by all these elements so you make a conscious decision what you want, which risks you accept, why you accept them, and that's the one thing I miss most. What's your exit scenario? Because you can say, I'm going to go Azure all the way, or AWS, or Google, or whatever. What is your exit strategy? All these companies that implemented Oracle, SAP, etc.,
They're
over
stuck.
the last decades
They're stuck.
are completely stuck. And the only thing that happens is that SAP comes along and Oracle comes along and says, yes, well, there's licenses and the
And
price will
prices.
increase. And the same thing is happening now in the low-code space as well, where all these organizations are first created a lock-in with the low prices, and now all these low-code companies are being picked up by either large corp or venture capitalists. What's the first thing that happens?
But
Hey, we have a lock-in. There
want to
goes.
make a profit, and they're not making a profit, so you need to raise the price.
Yeah, and the thing is that as long as you don't have an exit scenario, as long as you don't have a risk assessment on this, as long as you don't have a clear goal on what you expect from your data, how you allow others to work with it or not, um, how you expect things to go, then you are taking a significant risk for your organization's continuity. You're taking a significant risk for your clients, and you're taking a significant risk for us as a species. And,
It,
and that should be managed. And that's
uh,
not rules, regulations. These are things should be asked at shareholder meetings. Hey, you've gone to Azure. What's your exit scenario? Because I
yeah,
haven't seen anyone asking that question on a shareholder meeting.
it's interesting because there's another question that needs to be asked on a shareholder meeting, um, and that's if you look at the impact on the environment of AI. If you look at how much energy and how much clean water it costs to train an AI or to build an AI or an LLM, if a company says, "Oh, we're green and we're abiding by the ESG, etc., by no means they could use products like ChatGPT or likes, because they're far from everything that they stand for. And I'm not even talking about child labor or whatever, right? So
No,
if
but the energy cost of cloud, AI, etc. Um, I don't consider that to be the biggest problem. The biggest problem is the fact that we are unable to generate enough green, natural given energy. So as long as we need coal, we need oil, and we need nuclear,
it's a problem.
and we don't use wind, tidal energy, solar energy in significant enough measures, and we have not created a smart and good way to actually store energy when we have too much of it, so we can use it when we create too little of it. I mean, this entire electric car thing is, of course, a complete and utter crazy idea, because the problem is the recharging. While, for instance, a hydrogen car has the biggest advantage that storage is easy. Hydrogen can be made whenever we have an energy surplus. We've completely embarked, and this is again a design question. We have designed our world based on what I consider to be not enough critical thinking. Because if we have really done critical thinking, we would not be going electric cars, we would go hydrogen.
This is so funny. I fully agree. Everybody asked me why you're not driving an electrical car. I said it's a stupid concept, because in third world countries we're exploiting and we're creating the problem there, with all the mining, and then here we can say, oh, we're green, but it doesn't work that way. It's a global thing. That's one thing.
Yeah,
Secondly, um, um, again, hydrogen, you can produce it relatively cheap in the countries that have a lot of sun. Actually, you could the countries that are poor, you could help them by producing hydrogen there. They have a lot of sun. Put in solar energy, put in the factories, and basically you'll be stimulating their economy, also helping with the refugee crisis. So it's like a positive domino thing. And what we now see is Saudi Arabia and these rich countries investing heavily. They have the sun, of course, but investing heavily in hydrogen energy. And they're right. They're fully right. They'll be ahead of us. Again, they'll profit from it.
No,
Um,
but to be honest, I travel quite often to the Arab
Emirates.
areas, and their strategic thinking and their long-term thinking is really pretty good. And it has nothing to do with the fact that they have a lot of oil money. It helps, but their way of thinking is generational, is not individual. And we out here in the West think far more individual. And if you go, for instance, to other countries that are really picking up speed, they're also thinking generational. India, the Philippines, Thailand, Taiwan, they are
Norway
there.
did it with their oil money, putting it in huge funds, not spending it on
Yeah.
just regular spending. It's for the people of Norway,
Hmm.
not like we did in Holland that we just used it for government funding.
Yeah. But
So
let's also be honest. We can talk about a lot of things, but if there's one thing that's not invented yet and not likely to be invented soon, is time travel backwards. So we can talk for hours on the shit we did wrong.
yeah, but we need to figure out how to do things right.
We need to make sure that we don't make the same freaking mistake, and we need to make sure that we are improving. And that's why you asked earlier about what should we do. It's about this mindset. We can all talk about things that have gone wrong. Yeah, shit.
No, we can't change the past. It is what it is. But we need to learn from it and take out the good stuff and eradicate the bad stuff.
And that is what is currently lacking in the AI discussion. We're not
Yeah, I
we're
agree.
not we're not taking out the mistakes we made in the past. There's still the propaganda machines. There's either disguised as marketing or whatever. Um, there's and that's one of the other problems. There's also a lot of opportunity to be anonymous. The cool things about being anonymous is that you can say a lot of things, but the bad things is that it's also quite hard to be held accountable for what you say and what you do. So it's a whole spectrum what we need to think of, and there is no one solution. If there was one golden bullet, I would probably already have made a business around it. Uh, yeah, let's be honest. I'm an
Yeah,
entrepreneur, so
yeah.
I
But are in. Of course, you're an entrepreneur, but you have entrepreneurs that are only about money, and there's more to you than just the making money part.
yeah, but let's also be honest. It's easy to talk about this stuff when you have something.
True.
If I would be fighting on a daily basis to give my children something to eat, I probably don't have the time to think on these kind of things and formulate an opinion and help people get further. So for me, there's a correlation to being privileged and the responsibility you have to society in order to improve society, which is something else than paying a lot of taxes and hope the government does the best, because
They
that's
won't.
a different discussion. For me, it's about a moral obligation. I don't need rules that I need to employ handicapped people in one of my companies. I'm going to do it. I don't need a rule for that. And the same one goes for what we discuss on technology. I don't need a rule that tells me that GDPR is there, because from an ethical point of view, I'm not going to store this data anyway. So why the hell should I obey to a rule? We make the rules because too many people don't have the moral compass.
It's
And the
just about
reason
money.
and the reason this moral compass has been left, is dwindling away, has to do with the fact that we are marketing, selling emotions, dreams, things you could have, things you should have. Um, why I think that things like the Kardashians are a complete, not only waste of time, But once you start telling people that the 0.00001% is the norm, then people are going to strive for that norm. And the more you use AI and tooling to show to people what they don't have, the
The
less
more they
happy
want
they
it.
will become. The more they want it, and the more destructive they become in wanting it. And now we're training AI stuffs on this kind of emotions, which
Yeah.
means that we will have automated marketing that's targeted on making sure that you're jealous, envious, want more, etc. And we're not training AIs to be helping you to be happy with what you have. And this will create an even bigger um, shift to very dangerous extremist thinking.
Um, if I hear you say this, it sort of resonates to me. Okay, but we need to start. This starts in schools.
Yes, it starts in
At
schools, but
home, it starts at
especially
home and in schools, but also, as you said before, it starts on the devices you give the children, um, um, and it starts by understanding that life is not in a device. It's you know life is more about physical connections between people, having a
yeah,
normal conversation, discussion, exchange of thoughts. You don't need a computer or AI or WhatsApp or whatever to do that. And
exactly. And I believe it is my firm belief that um, people that have the ability and the time and the opportunity to think and feel comfortable, etc., is to help people with this kind of thinking. And if you then do it in schools, do it at home, do it at your job, do it in a podcast like this, in a blog, it really doesn't matter. It actually, I would love it if people have listened to this podcast, take a few things out of it, use it, and I don't need the
it
freaking
create new
quote.
content.
And I don't need the freaking quote. This Van Berkum said it's irrelevant. I mean, this whole world is about I want to be center stage. I need this. Nah, it doesn't matter.
No, it's about
But
the result.
yes, and that's also why. And coming back because about technology, technology is not technology per se. You want to achieve something with it, and if we don't think on what we want to achieve, we will build the wrong stuff, we'll buy the wrong stuff, we'll deliver the wrong stuff, and in the end, we'll create something that is not what we want to be, not how we want to go, and we've come into a position where being able to change is going to be freakishly hard.
If you could make one last closing statement, because I think you're on the one hand we're having this philosophical discussion. But if you zoom out, it's actually not that philosophical. It sort of intertwines with the current reality, and that's actually scary because usually it's philosophical. You think in your head, and it's sort of dreaming. But this is not dreaming. This is actually the shit we have to deal with, and it's now. It's not tomorrow. So if you could make a closing statement, and you would focus on people in a company, leading a company, and they say, okay, what Arjen and Doron are saying, that makes sense. I need to change. Where does he or she, or where do they start? If you were in a boardroom, what's the first big step they could take?
It's like a statement, and the statement would be the following: embrace AI, identify the risk, capture the benefits, and reinvest it in your people.
Thank you very much, Arjen. I love this last statement. It is exactly what it should be. And that's an ethical use of the value you create, not just the ethical use of AI, but also of the value you create as a company or as a person. Thank you very much, Arjen. And I would love to do this again in half a year time, see where the world went, and see if we
Yeah,
actually made this ripple in the ocean.
yeah, cool. Let's do that. Okay.
Thank
Thank
you
you
very
for
much,
having
man.
me, Doron.
Thanks.